She did it to her ex-husband. She invited him over the house and then did it, but no charges. No charges. She wasn't charged because she said it was self-defense.
Sonia McKnight has been sentenced to 13.5 to 30 years in prison for shooting her ex-boyfriend. While in court, she also announced her resignation to her judgeship duties.
In the early morning hours of February 10, 2024, 54-year-old Michael McMichael woke up in his Harrisburg, Pennsylvania home to excruciating pain in his head and complete darkness. He couldn't see anything. He began screaming in agony, and the woman he had been living with allegedly asked him what he had done to himself. But Michael hadn't done anything to himself. A bullet had entered the right side of his face, traveled through his head in a straight line behind his eyes, and exited the left side of his face while he was sleeping.
She was accused of shooting her ex-boyfriend, 55-year-old Michael McCoy, while he was sleeping inside his home along Saddle Ridge Drive in Susquehanna Township back on February 10th of 2024. McCoy did testify during the trial, stating he did not shoot himself, which is what the defense argued.
The shooter was not an intruder, not a stranger who had broken into the house. It was Sonia herself, a sitting district judge in Dauphin County, Pennsylvania, who had been living with Michael for about a year. The shooting happened just hours after Michael had told Sonia he wanted to end their relationship and needed her to move out of his home. This is the chilling story of a Pennsylvania judge who thought she was above the law, a woman who had a pattern of shooting the men in her life when relationships ended, and a survivor who testified against the person who tried to kill him while he slept. This is the tragic case of Judge Sonia McKnight.
An incident involving her shooting her ex-boyfriend, who had just broken up with her a week prior, at his Susquehanna Township home. This incident happening last year, February 2024. Prosecutors saying McKnight was the only person who could have shot her ex-boyfriend, Michael McCoy, in that home. McCoy said he could not see when he woke up in excruciating pain during the overnight hours of February 10th. He couldn't tell who shot him, but he was adamant that he did not shoot himself. And to his knowledge, McKnight was the only other person in the home when he went to bed.
58-year-old Sonia McKnight was elected as a magisterial district judge in Dauphin County, Pennsylvania in 2015. Her election came during a contested race against the incumbent district judge Robert Jennings III, who was seeking re-election despite an investigation into misconduct. Sonia's victory was seen by some as a positive change, an opportunity to bring integrity back to the position, but others questioned whether she had won by default, benefiting from her opponent's legal troubles rather than her own qualifications. Once in office, Judge Sonia took on an even more approachable face. She positioned herself as a community leader and advocate. She became involved in various initiatives and worked to establish herself as someone who cared about the people she served. Those who testified on her behalf during later proceedings would speak about her accomplishments as a magistrate judge, her community activism, and her role as a mother. She had multiple children, including her eldest son, Stephen Baltimore, who would later obtain power of attorney over her affairs. But beneath the surface of her judicial career, Sonia's personal life was turbulent and marked by violence. In October of 2018, she obtained a protection from abuse order against her estranged husband, Enoch McKnight. The order was based on allegations that Enoch had tried to pull her from a car while she was driving, causing her to crash into a fire hydrant. Sonia pleaded guilty to simple assault in connection with that incident and was sentenced to time served, 15 days in jail. The protection order initially prohibited contact between Sonia and Enoch, but it was later modified to allow peaceful contact between them. Some observers would later suggest that Sonia had orchestrated this change strategically, setting up what would happen next. But what no one could have anticipated was just how deadly that peaceful contact would become. On May 10, 2019, Enoch McKnight went to his estranged wife's home on Lexington Street to help her move furniture. Despite the history of violence between them and the protection order that had only recently been modified, Enoch agreed to assist Sonia with the move. The interaction seemed innocent enough at first, just an ex-husband helping her former wife with a practical task. But at 8:34 a.m. that morning, the peace shattered. A gunshot rang out inside the home.
McKnight shot her boyfriend Michael McCoy in his Susquehanna Township home back in February of 2024. The shooting partially blinded McCoy. McCoy testified that he woke up in extreme pain and that McKnight was the only other person in the house at the time of the shooting.
Police responded to reports of shots fired on Lexington Street. When officers arrived, they learned that a man with gunshot injuries had already been transported to a local hospital emergency room. Authorities initially declined to release the identities of those involved or specify which hospital had received the victim. A neighbor who spoke to the news media described hearing a single gunshot and seeing police swarm the area before going back inside. The investigation that followed examined whether Sonya McKnight was justified in shooting her estranged husband. Sonya claimed she had acted in self-defense, that Enoch had become aggressive and she had feared for her life.
According to previously filed court documents, on the night of the shooting, McKnight told police she was asleep when the shooting happened, and in a previous statement, her attorney said she was innocent.
After reviewing the evidence and circumstances, prosecutors made the decision, a shocking decision. They decided not to charge Sonya with any crime. The shooting was ruled an act of self-defense and she was cleared of all potential charges. Judge Sonya was placed on paid administrative leave while the investigation was ongoing, but once she was cleared, she returned to her position on the bench. To the outside world, it appeared that she had been a victim who had been forced to defend herself against a violent ex-husband. Sonya herself would later speak publicly about the incident, expressing gratitude to God for vindicating her and thanking her attorney for believing in her innocence. She stated that she had done nothing wrong and was ready to return to her work as a judge, serving the community that had elected her. But to observers who were keeping track, this was strike two. First, the shooting of her estranged husband, then the allegations of misconduct involving her son.
Yeah, District Judge Sonya McKnight's suspension has been in place since November 14th for ethical violations charged against her back in September. Now, McKnight was suspended for the first time back in 2021 after allegedly interfering with a traffic stop that involved her son, but was acquitted of all charges. Now, 7 allegations of misconduct have been filed against her that has her sidelined once again.
But once again, Sonya had avoided serious consequences. She remained on the bench, continued her work as a district judge, and maintained her position of authority in the community. Little did anyone know that the worst was yet to come. By 2024, Judge Sonya McKnight had entered into a new relationship with a man named Michael, who was 54 years old. The two had been together for about a year, and Sonya had moved into Michael's home on Saddle Ridge Drive in Susquehanna Township. For a while, the relationship seemed stable, and they lived together as a couple. But as time went on, Michael began to realize that the relationship wasn't working. He wanted out, and he needed Sonya to leave his home. What he didn't know was that trying to end the relationship with Judge Sonya McKnight would nearly cost him his life. By early 2024, Michael McCoy had made a difficult decision. He had been trying to convince Sonya to move out of his home, repeatedly asking her to leave so they could both move on with their lives. But Sonya was resistant, unwilling to accept that their relationship was over. The tension between them continued to build as Michael pressed the issue, making it clear that he wanted her gone.
McCoy testified the pair had been dating for about a year. He says McKnight began living with him about a month into their relationship, and there was a pattern of them arguing, him asking her to leave, and her staying. Leading up to the shooting, McCoy said he and her had gotten into an argument and he asked her to leave.
The relationship was breaking down. He was asking her to move out of his household.
On Friday, February 9th, 2024, Michael came home from a restaurant to find Sonya sitting on the couch in her pajamas. He had reached his breaking point. That evening, he told her directly that he planned to contact her mother to help get her belongings out of his house. According to Michael's later testimony, it was in that moment that Sonya finally seemed to understand the relationship was truly over. There was a look in her eyes, a realization that Michael was serious and wouldn't change his mind. But what Michael didn't know was how Sonya would respond to this rejection. That night, Michael went to bed around 11 p.m. exhausted from the emotional confrontation and ready to sleep. As he drifted off to sleep in his own home in his own bed, he had no reason to believe he was in danger. After all, Sonya was a judge, someone sworn to uphold the law and protect the innocent. But what happened next would reveal a darker truth about the woman he had been living with. Around 12:45 a.m. on Saturday, February 10th, 2024, Michael suddenly woke up to massive head pain unlike anything he had ever experienced.
Described the events that led up to his being shot. One of the most amazing things is he didn't even realize he was shot. He woke up in pain. He thought he had an aneurysm. He had blood coming out of his mouth and nose.
He couldn't see. Everything was dark. He began screaming in agony, confused and terrified about what was happening to him. He had heard nothing before the pain started, no sound that would have warned him of danger. But then he heard Sonia's voice.
After waking up and screaming in pain, McCoy told the court the first thing he heard was McKnight's voice. He says she kept yelling, "Mike, what did you do to yourself?" He says he asked her to call an ambulance. According to McCoy, it wasn't until paramedics arrived that he was informed he'd been shot in the head.
She was asking him what he had done to himself, her tone suggesting that Michael had somehow hurt himself. But Michael knew he hadn't done anything. He had been asleep just moments before. He had no idea what had happened, only that he was in unbearable pain and couldn't see anything. But he hadn't even realized the gravity of his pain yet. What he didn't yet realize was that a bullet had entered the right side of his face near his temple, traveled through his head in a straight line behind and slightly below his eyes, and exited near his left temple. Someone had shot him in the head while he was sleeping, and there was only one other person in the house.
I think what I talked about in my closing is using your common sense. That's what I urge the jurors to do. There were two people in that house, and only two people in that house, and one of them, the one who was shot, said he did not shoot himself. The logical conclusion is the other person did it.
According to police reports, Sonia assisted Michael in what was described as a delayed manner. She appeared to be avoiding taking him to the nearest bathroom and seemed hesitant when he asked her to call 911. The delay was noted by investigators as unusual behavior for someone who had just discovered their partner had been shot. But eventually, the call was made and emergency medical services were dispatched to the home on Saddle Ridge Drive. When EMS arrived at the scene, they quickly assessed Michael's condition and made a shocking discovery. He had suffered a single gunshot wound to the head. The bullet's trajectory was clear, entering on one side and exiting on the other. They had to move quickly. Michael was immediately transported to a local hospital where doctors worked to stabilize him, but the damage had been done. The bullet had destroyed his vision in one eye, leaving him permanently blind on that side. He would survive the shooting, but his life would never be the same. A police officer who was on the scene asked Michael the critical question that would shape the investigation: had he shot himself? Michael's reaction was described as pure shock. He exclaims that he absolutely hadn't shot himself, his voice filled with disbelief that anyone would even suggest such a thing. He told police clearly and unequivocally that he had been asleep when the shooting occurred and had no idea what had happened until he woke up in excruciating pain. Meanwhile, investigators began interviewing Sonia McKnight about what had occurred. When questioned about the events of that morning, Sonia's responses were described in the criminal complaint as deceptive. She claimed that she had been sleeping and had heard Michael screaming, which woke her up. She stated she had no idea what had happened and suggested that perhaps Michael had done something to himself. But her story didn't add up, and investigators began to dig deeper. The investigation quickly revealed several crucial facts.
Just after 8:30 this morning on the 2700 block of Lexington Street. This afternoon, many people surrounding the home sharing hugs, as well as police and canines investigating the area. While the people involved have not been identified, property tax records show it is owned by Magisterial District Judge Sonia McKnight.
First, the gun used in the shooting was registered to Judge Sonia McKnight. Second, both Sonia and Michael confirmed that no one else was in the home at the time of the shooting. There were only two people present, and one of them had been shot while sleeping. The logical conclusion, according to investigators, was that the person who hadn't been shot was the one who had pulled the trigger. But prosecutors knew they would face challenges in proving their case. There were no eyewitnesses to the actual shooting. Michael had been asleep and couldn't see his attacker. Sonia claimed innocence and would likely argue that there was no proof she had fired the weapon. The case would come down to circumstantial evidence, forensic analysis, and the jury's willingness to use common sense to determine what really happened. Investigators also discovered something else that would undermine Sonia's claim that she had been asleep. Doorbell cameras from neighboring homes captured footage that contradicted Sonya's statement that she had not left the house the night of the shooting. The video evidence showed she had been outside at some point, though the exact timing and significance of this footage would become a matter of debate during the trial. Sonya McKnight was arrested and charged. She was facing charges of attempted murder and aggravated assault. Given her position as a sitting district judge, the case created an immediate conflict of interest for the district attorney's office. It took several reassignments until the DA Sean McCormack and First Assistant DA Courtney Hare LaRue would be responsible for bringing Judge Sonya McKnight to justice. Sonya McKnight was released on $300,000 bond while the case moved through the legal system. For over a year, she remained free, maintaining her innocence and preparing for trial. In mid-November 2023, the Court of Judicial Discipline took a step against her. She was suspended without pay amid the ongoing investigation. But Sonya continued to insist she had done nothing wrong, that she was being falsely accused, and that the truth would eventually vindicate her just as it had in her previous cases.
He said when he woke up, he was completely blind. He was jumping out of bed. Now, mind you, this is early Saturday morning. He said he felt the worst headache in his life and the most pain he has ever experienced in his life. He was in total belief that somebody just told him that there was a bullet hole in the side of his face by the time the cops got there. He even said that when he started screaming for help, Sonya was in another room going, "Oh my God, Mike, what did you do? What did you do to yourself? What did you do?" He was like, "What do you mean? What did I do? Call the ambulance." She even asked him, and he said this on stand, "What's the number to the ambulance?"
The trial finally began in early April 2025, more than a year after the shooting. Because of the conflicts of interest involving Sonya's position as a judge in Dauphin County, a jury was brought in from Delaware County and bused to Harrisburg to hear the case. The trial would last 2 days, with both sides presenting dramatically different versions of what happened that night. The prosecution's case was straightforward and relied heavily on logic and circumstantial evidence. District Attorney Sean McCormack argued that there were only 2 people in the house at the time of the shooting. One of them, Michael McCoy, had been shot in the head while sleeping and testified that he absolutely did not shoot himself. The only logical conclusion, McCormack argued, was that the other person in the house, Sonya McKnight, had pulled the trigger. He urged the jury to use common sense when evaluating the evidence. Then the prosecution presented their case. Prosecutors presented testimony about Sonya's behavior on the night of the shooting. They highlighted how she had delayed calling 911, how she had avoided taking Michael to the nearest bathroom, and how she had repeatedly asked him what he had done to himself rather than expressing shock or horror that he had been shot. They also presented the doorbell camera footage from neighbors' homes that contradicted Sonya's claim that she had been asleep and hadn't left the house. Perhaps most damaging to Sonya's defense was the testimony from Michael McCoy himself. Despite being blind in one eye and unable to identify who shot him, Michael testified that Sonya was the only other person in the home. He described going to bed after telling her he wanted to end the relationship and that he plans to get her mother to help remove her belongings. He explained waking up to unbearable pain and complete darkness and emphasized that he had absolutely not shot himself. The defense team attempted to create reasonable doubt by focusing on forensic evidence. They argued that when police tested both Sonya and Michael's hands for gunshot residue, Michael's hands showed the most residue while Sonya's did not. This, they suggested, could indicate that Michael had been the one holding the gun when it fired, possibly in a suicide attempt or accidental discharge. However, the prosecution had a response to this argument. They pointed out that Sonya had washed her hands twice before police could swab them for the chemicals that would show she had been near a firearm when it was discharged. By washing her hands, she had effectively removed the evidence that would have proven she fired the weapon. The jury would have to decide whether this was an innocent action or a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence. The defense also tried to suggest that there was no proof Sonya had actually pulled the trigger, arguing that the absence of an eyewitness meant the prosecution couldn't definitively prove who fired the shot. But prosecutors countered by emphasizing the physical impossibility of Michael shooting himself in the manner described. The bullet's trajectory, entering one temple and exiting the other in a straight line behind his eyes, would have been extremely difficult, if not impossible, for someone to accomplish on themselves, especially while lying in bed asleep. After 2 days of testimony and closing arguments, the jury began their deliberations. McCormick later admitted that he was nervous and anxious during the wait, pacing around despite believing he had presented a strong case. But the jury didn't deliberate long. After less than 2 hours, they returned with their verdict. What they decided would determine whether a sitting judge would spend decades in prison or walk free. On April 9, 2025, the jury found Sonya McKnight guilty on all charges. She was convicted of attempted murder and aggravated assault. The courtroom fell silent as the verdict was read. Sonya's defense team immediately requested that she be released on bond pending sentencing, but the trial judge rejected the request. Judge Howard Kneisen ordered that Sonya be taken into custody immediately. She was led away in handcuffs, her days as a free woman over. Then the sentencing hearing was scheduled for May 28, 2025. When that day arrived, 7 people spoke on Sonya's behalf, including her eldest son, Stephen Baltimore. They spoke about her accomplishments as a magistral judge, her community activism, and her role as a mother. They painted a picture of a woman who had contributed to society and deserved leniency. But 3 people also spoke on behalf of the McCoy family, and while they expressed forgiveness for Sonya, they asked for a reasonable sentence that reflected the severity of what she had done. Michael McCoy was not present at the sentencing hearing, but he submitted a victim impact letter to the court describing how the shooting had changed his life forever. He was now permanently blind in one eye, living with physical impairment and serious mental trauma from being shot in his own home by someone he had trusted. Judge Howard Kneisly listened to all the testimony and reviewed all the evidence before delivering his sentence. He told Sonya that she was totally without remorse for the shooting, noting that she had not apologized to Michael or his family for her actions. Then he sentenced her to a prison term of no less than 13.5 years and no more than 30 years. But this was not the end of the penalty. As part of the penalty, Sonya was also officially removed from her position as a magisterial district judge. District Attorney McCormick spoke to the media after the sentencing, expressing relief that justice had been served. He emphasized that nobody should be above the law regardless of their profession or position in society. He noted that he had prosecuted police officers and now a district judge, and that the law should be applied evenly and equally across the board. When asked about the jury's quick deliberation time, he explained that it showed the jurors had been paying attention and had taken their responsibility seriously. Sonya's attorney indicated an appeal was ongoing and that she continued to maintain her innocence. But for now, Sonya McKnight would spend the foreseeable future behind bars, her judicial career over and her reputation destroyed by the very crimes she was sworn to prosecute as a judge. Michael McCoy survived to tell his story, but he will live the rest of his life with the permanent consequences of trusting the wrong person. Let me know what you think in the comment section below.